My game of the day from round 2 of the Wijk aan Zee tournament is Magnus Carlsen against Fabiano Caruana. Well, they've had some great games over the past couple of years, and this game was also not without interest. Of course, Caruana will be one of the 8 candidates fighting it out in March for the right to challenge Carlsen in a World Championship match later on in the year. So, well, who knows, maybe this is a foretaste of things to come. Carlsen opened with a slightly unorthodox g3 and bishop g2, but actually normally this transposes to more regular systems, for example d4 and d5, and one can play an English with c4 as well. But Carlsen played e4. Now c5 would transpose to a kind of close Sicilian. Caruana kept the symmetry with e5, and now knight e2, so white wants to play d4 to break open the centre, and Caruana shut down that possibility with c5. So now we have transposed into a kind of close Sicilian, except white hasn't yet played the knight out to c3, and this can be of some benefit to white. Carlsen played bishop e3, as we'll see in a second, hitting the c pawn, so d6 from black, and queen d2. So, well, typical development of white's pieces here. So if black plays knight e7, then bishop h6, if not now, at some moment, can be well, a way to weaken black's king position. So Caruana played instead knight d4. Now you can see, because the knight hasn't hopped out c3, then white can drive away the knight with c3. If that knight's on c3, then this is often such a good move in the close Sicilian, very disruptive for white. But c3 drives that knight, or puts the question to the knight straight away. So Caruana exchanged, and now he played knight e7. So you can see that well, white hasn't got this possibility of bishop h6 any longer. I mean, white could simply play knight d2 in this position, but Magnus likes to test his opponent, to ask them awkward questions, and the advance of the h-pawn, well, we saw this in yesterday's game of the day with Caruana against Elyanov. The advance of the h-pawn asks black a difficult question. Do you want to allow this to advance? Well, probably not, because white could be able to generate an attack on the h-file. Should you block it? Well, perhaps. But if f5 comes, then white may be able to use the g5 square for his bishop. So Caruana played h6, and that means that he can answer h5 with g5. Now, white could simply develop here, but Carlsen ploughed on and wanted to take advantage of this straight away. So what Carlsen would like to do is play the pawn to f5 potentially, and that would really clamp black's pieces. So Caruana exchanged all the pawns in the centre, played knight c6. That knight isn't doing much, so the knight came to c6. Now knight a3. Well, we simply have an interesting position on the board, and I think that's really what Carlsen wanted from this opening. He sought to avoid Caruana's preparation, and yeah, interesting position on the board. Both sides have a slight problem here of what to do with their kings. Clearly, the king side for both sides is very drafty. Perhaps the queen side is inviting, but, well, for one thing, it's going to take black's king a little time to actually get to the queen side. So slightly tricky position for black, and knight c4 is coming to look at that weakened pawn on d6. Caruana played bishop e5. Probably a good move. What he wants to do is well, he's very keen to trade, because that means the queen can come out to g5 potentially, and Carlsen can't slip away to the queen side very easily because of that bishop skewering queen and rook. So in this position, Carlsen dropped back. Now that does allow a bishop g3 check, but the king can play to d2, and actually it's fairly safe there. So bishop e6 played by Caruana, and now knight c4, and this is another big moment for black actually. Should the bishop exchange itself off for the knight? At first glance this looks pretty nice, with that lovely bishop in the middle of the board that can't be pushed away by any pawns. But I think Caruana did well to avoid this. For example, in this position, after bishop h3, now that's a wonderful bishop. That bishop doesn't have an opponent. Black's king can't castle, and if it tries to slip away to c7, then rook f1. Now that rook hits this pawn. That pawn's a little vulnerable. White has the two bishops. I think this is better for white. Would have been tempting to take that though. So instead, Caruana checked the king, which slipped to d2, and looks pretty secure in the middle of the board. Queen d7. So that bishop looks a bit weird on g3, but it can be protected by a rook if it's attacked by the queen, for example. Strange position though. Now, if Carlsen wants to, he could play king c2, just giving his king a little bit more security at the side, and maybe play rook g1. Possible to play like that, but instead, once again, he likes to test his opponent. He played d4, and this asks black very awkward questions. So, well, first of all, Caruana exchanged, and now, big moment in the game, white threatens to push with d5, winning a piece, forking bishop and knight. So how does black deal with this? Well, okay, what about advancing the b-pawn? Well, then the knight just goes back, and well, the pawn on b5 is threatened, d5 still threatened, that doesn't really achieve much. d5, well, that's a straight blunder, because now white can open up the e-file, and there is a deadly discovered check with bishop f4, and that's check to the king. What about bishop g4? That's not really great, because after this exchange that bishop looks awful on g3. What about knight e7? Just ducking out of the way of this, avoiding this fork. Well, white plays d5 anyway, and well, the bishop look pretty weird here, but also that knight. All these possible moves are covered by white's pawns, and that knight is really poorly placed. Positionally very poor for black. So after over 15 minutes thought, Caruana came up with knight e5. Crazy move. If this is taken with the pawn, then suddenly there's a nasty check, and if the king steps to the c-file, then queen c6, and well, black is certainly going to recover that piece with all this firepower on it, and black should be more than fine. So Caruana exchanged, Carlsen exchanged on e5 and closed the position with d5. So although his king is staggering around in the middle of the board, in fact Carlsen manages to keep the position closed. This is a mad moment, because of course that's actually not a threat because of the pin. Black could play f5, but amazingly king c2 is probably a good move, even though this steps into the open c-file, but that king can find security on the queen side, and this is very awkward actually for black. So Caruana reacted correctly. He played bishop g4. And if queen d3, well, now f5 is more dangerous. Carlsen played bishop f3, I think correctly, although Caruana said he was happy after this move, but certainly, well, he was happy because he can now bring his queen to start hassling White's king. The bishop can't be taken here because that's going to be, well, let's just say at least a draw for black. And now here, Carlsen, again, very pragmatic actually. He played rook c1, bringing his rook into the game. He obviously felt that it was simply too risky to play b3, although my computer seems to think that White's king can stagger around here and possibly find some sort of security, but I have a feeling that Carlsen rejected this on just a kind of gut feeling that he didn't want his king staggering around with an open file when his rooks aren't in play. I think that's completely understandable. And black certainly has some kind of compensation here for, well, he might be losing a pawn, but for example after rook g8. So instead Carlsen played rook c1, allowing that pawn to be taken. But at least he brings his rook into play. And now that bishop is loose, so this is a very strange position. You can see that both sides need to bring their rooks into play. Bishop f4 played. Also, of course, if rook g8, you have to watch out for a simple pin here. So bishop f4 played, and this was taken, and rook g8. So things starting to look a little bit dicey for Carlsen now, with this rook potentially coming into play. And at this moment, well, he played rook f1, threatening something nasty himself. But with this, really, he acquiesces to the draw, and they agree to a draw here. Well, obviously they're repeating the position. It's a draw by perpetual check, or repeating the position. By this stage, that's probably the correct result. But yeah, very, very interesting game with lots of cut and thrust, and neither side backing down, which I really like. Very entertaining. So, well, after this draw, Caruana has 1.5 out of 2, and he is still in the lead actually after 2 rounds, because all 7 games in the top tournament were drawn today. I think people were much more cautious today after quite a few decisive games in the first round. Do join me for round 3 tomorrow. Thanks for watching.